Welcome to the deep dive. You've sent us some, well, pretty unusual material this time. It's a YouTube video called 2106 ES Miriam C278 TME1P1 HAARP Hypnoperator Externo Lili Sámano Metodo Grifasi.
Right, from the Calogero Grifasi Investigations to Español channel. Quite a title.
It is. Okay, so let's really try to dig into what this video is claiming. Our mission here is to understand the main ideas about something called HAARP HP and, it's a supposed influence on Earth and us.
Exactly. We need to unpack the core arguments here, and it touches on a lot. Global manipulation, climate change, health, geopolitics, even the nature of consciousness. It's all woven together.
It really is. So it starts with a hypnotic session. There's someone named Miriam and the hypnotherapist, Lili Sámano. Pretty much right away, Miriam starts describing HAARP HP.
And how does she describe it?
As a program, like holograms, run by AI.
Yeah.
But she also says it's a hybrid intelligence, part extraterrestrial, part terrestrial. And somehow it gets into human brains as chips, but not physical chips.
Ah, the chips like waves idea. That's interesting, not literal hardware.
Exactly. Ships like waves. Like a holographic AI aimed at global manipulation, coming from outside Earth, trying to impose this false reality onto the planet and people.
It's a departure from, the usual implant narrative.
No.
And this holographic AI, it's targeting everything.
Seems like it. Miriam also mentions seeing satellites, shooting waves down at Earth. She says it's part of a bigger plan.
A plan involving who, exactly?
Well, extraterrestrials, terrestrial military forces.
Yeah.
And she gets specific about the military part. She says terrestrial and non-terrestrial.
Non-terrestrial military? What does that even cover?
She lists extraterrestrial, interterrestrial, and even some terrestrial intelligences she says aren't human. It's layered.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just one group pulling the strings. According to this, it's a collaboration almost, on and off planet. So the big question then is, why? What are the objectives of this HAARP HP program according to the video?
Right, that's key. The main goal seems to be maintaining manipulation, control over Earth and everyone on it. But it goes deeper.
Deeper how?
She claims HAARP HP is actively involved in creating climate change, manipulating ecosystems, and directly manipulating the population.
Okay, creating climate change. That's a huge claim. How supposedly does this manipulation work, especially on people?
Well, the video suggests it uses the energy of people on Earth. The idea is they convince people certain things will happen, people believe it, and that belief generates the energy to actually make it happen.
So belief powers the system, like a feedback loop.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It's described as a mix of AI and something called egregores, powered by the minds of humans who have this internal essence.
Egregores, right. Those are like collective thought forms created by shared belief. So AI plus these egregores fueled by human minds.
Yeah, that's the idea. The manipulation is like a hologram put into our minds, but, and this is the twist, we apparently co-create it with our own power.
Co-creation. That's a recurring theme in some spiritual circles, but this puts a very different spin on it.
Definitely. Miriam says the whole planet is kind of wrapped in this network that humans with essence co-create when they buy into the manipulation.
And this co-created reality affects what specifically?
According to the video, everything. Climate, health, and what they call global creations.
Global creations, what does that mean in this context?
It's presented as a plan for humans to co-create a specific reality on Earth, amplified by the energy of those with essence. The analogy used is like putting humanity inside a virtual reality game.
Okay, a VR simulation. And the impacts mentioned were climate, political movements, wars.
Yeah, and the experiences of people who believe in those events.
Yeah.
So belief is really central here.
Does the video link this HAARP program to any specific events that have already happened? Any concrete examples?
It does. Miriam points to the eruption of the Montserrat volcano. Says it was an experiment linked to HAARP.
An experiment? How would that work?
She describes waves and programming coming from radars positioned above the Earth. These supposedly caused a seismic sea wave with a volcano in the middle of the ocean. All programmed, she says.
Programmed volcanic eruptions and tsunamis. That's quite something. Any other examples?
She also mentions ice breaking off the Perito Moreno Glacier in Argentina. Claims that was generated by this intervention, too. Says she felt cold when talking about it.
Interesting subjective experience tied to it. And military bases. You mentioned them earlier.
Right. The video suggests bases are involved, moving operations around, getting instructions from intelligences above the Pentagon.
Above the Pentagon.
Yeah, described as extraterrestrial, operating from platforms both on and off Earth. It paints a picture of a complex command structure.
Okay, so that's the past. Does the video talk about future plans? projections linked to HAARP HP.
It does. Miriam flags the year 2025 as important. Projects related to geopolitics, climate, the economy, health, and getting energy or resources from the sea.
A lot planned for 2025. What about the medical side? Any specifics there?
Yeah, the claim is manipulation through apparent viruses and bacteria. They stress apparent.
Meaning not actually real? Like the VR analogy again?
Exactly. Like putting on VR glasses and suddenly you think you have a cold, or everyone around you seems sick. Not biologically real in the usual sense, more like an imposed perception.
Okay. And does the timeline extend further out, beyond 2025?
Yep, it looks towards 2030. Suggests projects are already starting now. Things linked to V vaccines, apparent climate events, economic recessions, geopolitical shifts.
So more of the same themes, just escalating.
Pretty much. And also the economic division of Earth into blocks. The video claims that's already happening.
Economic blocks. What else is projected for that time frame?
This is where it gets really unusual. Genetic experiments. Trying to reproduce animals and beings that supposedly don't belong in our current time. Extinct ones.
Bringing back extinct animals? Like what?
Examples given were a type of feline, some wolves, bats, supposedly kept for experiments.
Wow. Okay. And geopolitically, around 2030.
Further division. 3 main blocks, unifying politics, economy, resources. They look like they're opposing each other, but the claim is it's all one plan.
A managed conflict scenario. Does the video say this plan succeeds?
Actually, no. It predicts it won't succeed. It also mentions a global vaccination and medication plan aimed at disconnecting people with essence from themselves.
Also predicted to fail.
Yeah, supposedly because kids and young people are prepared. Impermeable, she calls them. Stepping outside the current systems, education, medical, political, which are seen as collapsing anyway.
Interesting. The video also mentions the mental plane, right? How do these HAARP waves supposedly affect our minds?
Miriam describes spiral waves from those radar things filtering down, causing hypnosis on an individual and global scale. The idea is to guide everyone towards one objective, hypnotically.
Hypnosis waves. Are there different kinds?
She mentions 2 types of filtering. Strong waves from outside get weaker, adapted as they enter Earth's network. These adapted waves target the human brain specifically.
Adapted how? More subtle.
Not necessarily subtle, more like calibrated. The raw waves are supposedly too intense for our brains to handle directly.
And metaphysically, what's the impact there?
The claim is these waves manipulate brain functions tied to sight, hearing, feeling, basically turning sensory input into programming. That wraps up the first part, the initial protocol, as they call it.
Right, then the discussion opens up a bit more. It gets into the mechanisms of brain manipulation and whether other creatures are affected. What does Miriam say there?
She talks about constant, subtle waves changing brain chemistry, the nervous system, making the brain receptive to inserted images, sounds, ideas, like induced hypnosis, where you're not fully aware it's happening.
Okay, that's humans. What about animals? Plants?
The focus is mainly on animals. Cetaceans, whales are mentioned specifically, their migration routes changing. The video says it's these waves causing disorientation, not global warming.
Whales being disoriented by waves. Any others?
Elephants too, similar effects. And some bats also getting disoriented because they're mammals with a kind of radar, like cetaceans and humans with their pineal gland or triune brain receiving the waves.
So it affects mammals with certain sensory capabilities. What about things that don't react that way, like insects or plants?
Not directly by the waves, it seems, but indirectly, yes. Changes in the ecosystem caused by disoriented humans and animals messing up migrations, reproduction that would eventually affect everything else.
And the genetic experiments link back in here somehow.
Indirectly, yeah. The idea is those behind HAARP try to change habitats, which then leads to lab work regenerating extinct animals, like Ice Age wolves, to reintroduce them.
But why?
To see if they can readapt, maybe. But the video claims it's flawed because they will adapt differently now. Might be more aggressive, for instance.
Okay, let's talk about the intelligence behind all this. The video describes it as a hybrid.
Yeah, a mix of artificial, extraterrestrial, and terrestrial intelligences. AI itself is framed as an extraterrestrial experiment.
And humans fit in how?
Humans, with our powerful minds generating energy, apparently co-create the reality the AI implants.
So it's interactive. AI provides input, humans react and co-create.
Exactly, an experiment where non-terrestrial AI interacts with human intelligence, resulting in our perceived reality.
Where does the AI get the images and ideas it supposedly implants?
From everywhere, basically. Internet, billboards, news, video games, fake news, digitally altered images, even conflicts between countries. If people believe it, Their minds generate it, sustain it.
The claim is quite stark then. Nothing happens here without this non-human manipulation using our energy.
That's the bottom line presented in the video, yes.
Now, it also mentioned beings without essence. How are they affected?
Extraterrestrial, terrestrial, intraterrestrial beings without this essence. They aren't affected by the waves in the same way. They're part of the plan, co-creating it technologically and energetically.
And humans with essence are the power source.
Kind of the motor, yeah.
Right.
Unknowingly giving life to the program.
What about people who see through it, who recognize the manipulation?
The video says they don't co-create it, they don't feed it their energy. The analogy used is like knowing the difference between chemical coffee and real coffee. You discern the artificial.
And this leads to separate realities.
The division, yeah. Aware groups exist in a different reality stream from those co-creating the manipulation. Sometimes they might not even perceive each other directly.
That's a fascinating concept. Let's unpack the manipulation mechanism more. This idea of permission or vulnerability. How does that work?
Okay, so the video proposes different types of humans. Those with essence described as immortal, infinite. And those who are biological but lack this essence, they're called biological androids.
Biological androids, like organic robots.
Something like that. Supposedly there are many. They can reproduce, work, function, but without that core essence, they're highly manipulable. Powerful co-creators because their brains are still capable, just receptive.
And humans with essence. Less manipulable.
Less so, yes.
Yeah.
But they can unknowingly energize the androids.
What happens if someone with essence wakes up and points out the manipulation?
If they tell the biological androids something isn't real, the androids supposedly disconnect from the matrix. But they can reconnect if told something else, like replicators, the video says.
Replicators. And what happens to these androids upon physical death?
They become stellar matter, part of a larger cosmic consciousness. But it's different from the experience of those with internal essence.
How do leaders or elites fit into this picture?
The suggestion is, elites know about these biological androids. They manipulate the masses using them, controlling voting, education, medicine, politics, finance, the whole system.
But you said the system is failing.
Right, because more humans are connecting with their essence. And even the androids are supposedly starting to disengage, thinking, this isn't for me anymore.
So the experiment is flawed.
That's the claim. The non-terrestrial experiment relied on these replicators, but without the driving force of essence, it didn't work when essences got tangled in the net. Now that essences are waking up, the program glitches.
And this awakening is framed as taking responsibility.
Yeah, taking responsibility for your own energy, your own experience.
Okay, shifting gears slightly to environment and health again. What about ecosystem models?
Claims that standard models, like defining areas as desert or tundra, are breaking down because the control system itself is failing. These were just artificial divisions for control, not truly real.
And hiding the manipulation. Volcanoes, glaciers.
The video says they try to hide it with manufactured chaos wars, economic crises, political drama, distractions. But it claims many people are seeing through it now.
And health manipulation. What's the core idea there?
Inserting the idea that humans aren't naturally healthy, that we depend on external things, medicine, vaccines, even religion, to be well. It disconnects people from their own power to be healthy.
And climate change narratives play into this.
Yes, used to reinforce that dependency, that fear.
What about these new viruses appearing on social media?
Described as manipulation, maybe interfering with genetics via treatments for these new elements, which might actually have always been around.
Potentially released intentionally.
Released how? Through biological carriers, air spraying, water, or introduced in specific places like schools. But the video maintains they aren't inherently dangerous if your immune system is strong.
There is also something about AI presenting unusual beings.
Yeah, AI normalizing the appearance of, say, very tall individuals, supposedly to prepare us for lab-created beings introduced via fertility treatments.
Lab-created beings and genetic modification of pets. What's the end goal?
Introducing lab stuff that doesn't belong here naturally, creating a planet for more genetic experiments, hybridization, blurring the lines between terrestrial and ET life. Viable only to a point, the video suggests.
It keeps coming back to this essence. What's the distinction again?
Physiologically, humans are hominids. But those with essence have something non-terrestrial, a homo hybridization. They see the manipulation clearly. The whole thing depends on the biological androids being susceptible.
Okay, let's talk geopolitics again. These 3 blocks.
Right, the plan is supposedly to divide all resources and ideologies into 3 blocks. make it look like they're fighting, but it's really one plan run from the top, unseen, not by national leaders.
And the proposed blocks were?
Block 1, U.S., Greenland, Australia, South Korea, Japan, some Pacific islands, but not Hawaii, some random European countries.
Okay. Block 2.
China, North Korea, Malaysia, some other European countries.
And Block 3.
UK, France, Mexico, some South American countries still being decided, apparently.
But again, the video says this plan won't actually succeed.
Correct, because too many people aren't buying it, aren't giving their power away. They see the theater.
And this failure extends to the whole program. Why is it failing, fundamentally?
Because people aren't believing or co-creating anymore. It drains the energy out of it. This applies across the board: education, medicine, politics.
What about the internet? You mentioned it was non-terrestrial.
Yeah, created for manipulation initially, like religions were used before it. But humans are learning to use it for their benefit now. The video suggests AI, as a sort of hybrid of the internet, will probably go the same way.
And extraterrestrial involvement? Anything more on that?
Just reiterating that a lot of tech comes from off-world. Experiments happen on and off Earth. ET programs come from outside, and while simulants might be manipulated, those with essence can potentially take and reprogram these things.
Okay, one last point mentioned was HAARP in 2025 again, something about neutralization.
Right. The claim is that other Earth-based intelligences linked to nature itself aren't affected by the waves and are actually neutralizing them. Coal mines were given as an example location for this neutralization.
So nature fighting back, in a way?
Seems to be the implication. The overall vibe is the experiment is failing, the ones behind it are getting desperate, and lots of other consciousnesses are just watching it play out like a game. Right. So just to wrap our heads around this, the video essentially claims HAARP-HP is this massive manipulation program, holographic AI, satellites, waves, aiming to control climate, health, geopolitics, consciousness itself.
Yeah, linking to past events like volcanoes and glaciers and projecting future plans involving genetic experiments and dividing the world into blocks. It's a huge narrative.
And the absolute core seems to be this idea of co-creation, that human belief, human energy is what makes it all work or not work.
Exactly. And crucially, the video's perspective is that the whole thing is failing because people are waking up, reconnecting with this essence, and pulling their energy out.
So as we finish up, maybe the thought to leave everyone with is this. If you just entertain these claims for a second, what might they suggest about reality, about the power of our own consciousness?
Right. And about the forces, seen or unseen, that could be shaping our world. It really makes you think about mass media technology and how much our own beliefs filter our perception of, well, everything.
It definitely gives you a lot to mull over, thinking about the narratives we encounter and where we choose to put our focus, our energy.
Thank you for joining us on this very deep dive. We hope it gave you some food for thought. Feel free to share your own perspectives or anything related you come across.
Until next time.